All right, we have very important breaking news today, and it's actually not all bad news. The coronavirus vaccine from Pfizer and BioNTech has been approved for emergency use in the United Kingdom. And this is a huge deal for a number of different reasons, some obvious, some maybe less obvious to people who are planning to get the vaccine, because you need to understand what's going on in the mind of the anti-vaxxers in order to understand some of the relevance here. So I'll explain it all to you. So first and foremost, the vaccine approved in the UK for emergency use, this first vaccine, is the same vaccine that was submitted for approval in the United States, made by Pfizer and BioNTech, German and American companies. The FDA is meeting next week to decide on emergency use approval here in the United States as well. In the UK, their own agency, the Medicines and Healthcare Products Regulatory Agency, which licenses drugs in the United Kingdom, looked at the trial data. As you know, the trial data indicates that this vaccine is 95% effective at generating immunity to the coronavirus, and said, yes, the data is good. Let's start vaccinating people. Now, it is still going to be labeled experimental until final testing is done. This is similar to here in the US. If the FDA approves it next week, I believe they are meeting Wednesday, Thursday, Friday next week, or maybe right around that time. In the US, it would be given an emergency use authorization, not a full approval. Equivalent situation happening in the UK. The UK now expects 800,000 doses within days, and they expect people to be receiving the vaccine really as soon as that happens, potentially Monday in the UK, they are talking about. This is happening, and it is a really, really big deal. It is the start of, and it is going to be a long tunnel, but we are starting to see the light at the end of the tunnel. Now, this vaccine, different than the Moderna vaccine, the Pfizer BioNTech vaccine, requires storage at minus 70 degrees Celsius. So it's believed that all of the initial vaccination in the UK is going to be happening at hospitals that already have or were able to set up the equipment to store vaccines at that cold temperature. Now, the reasons that this is so important, some are obvious and some are not. So obvious, we need a vaccine. And this is a 100-year global pandemic with what in the US is soon to be a 9/11 a day in terms of deaths. We need a vaccine, and so this is huge. But the reason that this is also important, specifically because the UK has done this, is that there are people in the US who are not necessarily anti-vaxxers in general, but they're worried about the safety of a vaccine that is simply approved when Donald Trump is president. The idea being that any agency, including the FDA, could maybe be influenced by Donald Trump into approving something that should not yet be approved. Now, we've heard from Anthony Fauci that that's not the case. Once it became clear that despite Donald Trump's pleading in July, August, and September, none of the pharmaceutical companies developing vaccines pushed for approval before the election, I was increasingly reassured that we're not going to see haphazard, rushed approval requests from pharmaceutical companies. But if you were still worried about that, we now have a different country's health regulatory agency that has said this same vaccine is okay to use. So the point is, if you just don't trust the FDA under Trump, even if Trump is now a lame duck and is unlikely to still be pushing them to do anything they shouldn't do, you can say, I'm going to go by the British health regulatory agency's decision. Soon we're expecting the same thing from the EU's health regulatory agency. It's the same vaccine, the Pfizer BioNTech vaccine. And here in the US, as soon as next weekend, spoke to a doctor recently on the West Coast who said, we have been told, expect to get vaccinated maybe next weekend or just a couple of days after that. This is a major achievement. Pfizer says it can produce 80 million doses this year, which would be for 40 million people, and 1.3 billion doses next year, which would be enough for 650 million people. Remembering that you need 2 doses, this is needed acutely. The numbers in the US are brutal. We've not yet even seen the impact of the millions and millions of people who traveled for Thanksgiving to gather indoors and then travel home. And we still had yesterday 2,614 deaths. Yesterday, we saw the most deaths in a single day, dating all the way back to April 21st. And within days, we are expecting to absolutely blow through those numbers. Within a week, we could see the most deaths in a single day of the entire pandemic. We are very close to a 9/11's worth of deaths every single day. Now, the ship has sailed on convincing a huge part of this country about how serious this is. And the tragedy is that lots of those same people who refuse to behave responsibly also aren't interested in a vaccine. And we're going to have to figure out how we deal with that. I don't know the answer. As I spoke about with Congressman Ro Khanna yesterday, these vaccines initially will not be given to children. So if you look at our population, bearing in mind we need about 70% immunity for herd immunity, that means close to every adult has to be vaccinated for herd immunity, given that children will not be eligible for vaccines initially. This is an uphill battle. And the tragic irony of the people demanding everything go back to normal right away, those are the same people refusing to do the things that would actually help us to get back to normal. So great news from the UK. We're keeping an eye on whether we will get a press conference from the FDA next week announcing their decision about this same Pfizer BioNTech vaccine. And we will make every effort to cover that press conference live, if indeed it happens.